In the heart of the city, where glass towers pierced the clouds and neon lights painted the streets in gold and crimson, one name ruled above all others. He did not shout. He did not boast. He didn't need to. From the top floor of his private skyscraper, the Billionaire Mafia boss stood before a wall of floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city move beneath him like a chessboard. Traffic lights flickered in perfect rhythm. Crowds flowed along the sidewalks. Somewhere far below, a siren wailed, then abruptly went silent. He adjusted the cuff of his tailored black suit. Every movement was controlled. Measured. Behind him, a long mahogany table stretched across the dimly lit conference room. Around it sat men twice his age, politicians, business partners, underworld lieutenants. All waiting. One of them cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, the port shipment has been delayed. Customs is asking questions." Without turning around, the boss spoke calmly. "Customs doesn't ask questions," he said. "They receive answers." A bodyguard stepped forward silently, already dialing a number. Within seconds, the problem was no longer a problem. That was his power. Untouchable. Unquestioned. Even the city's wealthiest investors sought his approval. Even rival gangs avoided crossing invisible lines he had drawn years ago in blood and before we uncover the storm quietly forming inside this empire. If you enjoy powerful billionaire mafia stories filled with betrayal and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it, because what's about to happen will change everything. But power always casts a shadow. Later that evening, in his private family estate outside the city, a sprawling mansion surrounded by high iron gates and silent security patrols, tension simmered beneath polished smiles. His younger brother swirled a glass of expensive whiskey. "You've expanded too quickly," he said casually. "The risk is growing." His sister added, her voice smooth but sharp. "You don't consult us anymore." The boss leaned back in his chair at the head of the table. Candlelight flickered across his expression, revealing nothing. "I built this empire," he replied coldly. "Not you." Silence fell heavy in the room. Outside, wind rustled through the tall cypress trees lining the driveway. Somewhere in the distance, a guard's radio crackled. His siblings exchanged a brief glance, quick, subtle, dangerous. The boss noticed. He always noticed. But for the first time in years, something felt different. Not fear. Not threat. Something closer. Blood. The family estate stood far from the noise of the city, hidden behind tall iron gates and rows of ancient cypress trees that swayed softly under the night wind. Inside, the dining hall glowed with warm golden light from a grand crystal chandelier. Marble floors reflected the flicker of candle flames arranged along a table large enough to host diplomats. But tonight, this wasn't a celebration. It was a quiet battlefield. The billionaire mafia boss sat at the head of the table, posture straight, expression unreadable. To his right sat his younger brother, sharp-eyed and restless. To his left, his sister, elegant, poised, and far more calculating than she appeared. A servant poured wine into crystal glasses and left without making a sound. The doors closed. The room felt heavier. His brother broke the silence first. "You've been expanding into territories we never agreed on," he said, swirling the deep red liquid in his glass. "The northern docks. The foreign investors. It's too fast." The boss didn't react. He cut into his steak slowly, precisely. "Speed wins," he replied calmly. "Hesitation kills." His sister leaned back in her chair, studying him. "Or perhaps," she said softly, "arrogance kills." The air shifted. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly in the distance, and wind pressed against the tall windows. The boss finally looked up, his dark eyes steady. "If either of you believes you can manage this empire better than me," he said, voice low but firm, "you're welcome to try." Silence, but it wasn't surrender. It was calculation. His brother's jaw tightened, though he forced a faint smile. "We're family," he said smoothly. We only want what's best. Family, the word lingered in the air like smoke. Dinner ended shortly after. Chairs scraped softly against marble. Footsteps echoed down the long hallway lined with portraits of their ancestors, powerful men who had built the foundation of this empire decades ago. Later that night, in the mansion's private study, away from cameras and guards, the sibling stood alone. He thinks he's untouchable, the brother muttered. He always has, the sister replied, pouring herself another drink. But even kings fall. Her gaze drifted toward the large window overlooking the dark driveway below. We don't confront him, she continued calmly. We remove him. The brother hesitated. An accident? She gave him a slow, knowing smile. Outside, rain began to fall, light at first, then steady. Upstairs, unaware of the storm forming beneath his own roof, the boss reviewed shipment reports in his office. And somewhere in the shadows of that grand estate, a plan was already being set into motion, one that would soon send him speeding down a highway he would never forget. The city was quieter than usual that night, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that felt heavy, watchful. Rain from earlier had left the streets slick and shining under the orange glow of streetlights. Skyscrapers stood like dark giants against the midnight sky, their windows blinking with the last signs of life. Inside the underground parking garage of his towering headquarters, the Billionaire Mafia boss adjusted his cufflinks, his expression unreadable. Cancel tomorrow's meetings, he said calmly, stepping toward his armored black sedan. His driver, Malik, nodded. Yes, sir. We'll take the East Highway. It's clear. The engine roared to life, smooth and powerful. The car pulled out into the near-empty city streets, tires slicing through shallow rainwater. Inside, silence filled the space between them. The boss stared out the tinted window, lost in thought, unaware that this would be the longest night of his life. As they merged onto the highway, the city lights faded behind them. The road stretched ahead, dark and endless, surrounded by open industrial land and distant construction cranes that looked like skeletal figures in the night. Suddenly, a faint metallic snap echoed beneath the car. Malik frowned. Sir, did you hear? The steering wheel jerked violently in his hands. What's happening? The boss demanded, gripping the seat. The brakes, they're not responding. The speedometer climbed uncontrollably. 90. 110. 130 kilometers per hour. The highway ahead curved sharply near an unfinished overpass. Slow it down, the boss barked. I'm trying. The car swerved wildly, tires screeching against wet asphalt. Sparks flew as metal scraped the guardrail. The world outside blurred into streaks of orange and black. For a split second, everything felt suspended. Then, impact. The sedan slammed into a concrete barrier. Glass shattered like 1,000 screams. The force sent the vehicle flipping once, twice, before crashing upside down in a violent explosion of smoke and flame. Fire swallowed the front end of the car. The smell of burning fuel filled the air. Alarms from distant security posts began to echo faintly across the empty stretch of highway. Inside the wreckage, the boss hung suspended by his seatbelt, blood trickling down his temple. His vision blurred, ears ringing. Through the cracked windshield, flames danced wildly. And in his fading consciousness, one terrifying thought formed. This wasn't an accident. Then darkness closed in. Far in the distance, faint headlights appeared on the deserted road, approaching slowly, unknowingly toward the wreck that would change everything. The highway was silent again. Flames that had once roared violently now flickered weakly against the twisted metal of the overturned sedan. Smoke curled into the cold night air, blending with the faint mist rising from rain-soaked asphalt. In the distance, city lights shimmered like they belonged to another world, far removed from this wreckage. Inside the shattered vehicle, the Billionaire Mafia boss hung half-conscious, suspended by his seatbelt. Blood trickled down his temple, mixing with shards of glass scattered across his suit. The sharp scent of fuel filled his lungs. Somewhere, metal creaked. His fingers twitched. Alive. With shaking hands, he fumbled for the buckle. It released suddenly, and he crashed onto the roof of the car, now beneath him, groaning as pain shot through his ribs. He tried to move. Agony answered. Through blurred vision, he saw flames crawling closer. No, he rasped, voice barely audible. Using the last of his strength, he dragged himself toward the cracked window. His shoulder screamed in protest as he forced his body through the narrow opening. The cold pavement hit his palms. Rainwater mixed with blood as he collapsed beside the wreckage. Behind him, the fire flared brighter. Far across the city, in the quiet study of the family estate, his brother stared at a burning car shown on a private security feed. "It's done," he whispered. His sister exhaled slowly. "Make sure there are no remains that can be identified." They turned off the screen. Back on the highway, the boss lay motionless, barely breathing. Thunder rolled overhead, and rain began to fall harder, soaking his clothes, washing crimson into the gutter. Headlights appeared in the distance. Not police. A small vehicle slowed as it approached the wreckage. The engine cut off. A door opened. A woman stepped out, her long coat shielding her from the rain. She froze at the sight of the destroyed car, then noticed the faint movement near the guardrail. She rushed forward. "Oh my God." Kneeling beside him, she checked his pulse with trembling fingers. It was weak. But it was there. "You're not dying tonight," she whispered firmly. With surprising strength, she pulled him farther from the burning vehicle just moments before a final explosion shattered the silence, lighting the sky in orange fire. The blast reflected in her determined eyes. She didn't call the authorities. Instead, she made a decision that would change both their lives forever. And as sirens finally began to echo faintly in the distance, the mysterious woman helped the most feared man in the city disappear into the darkness. The rain had slowed to a whisper by the time her car left the highway. Instead of driving toward the city lights, toward hospitals, police sirens, and questions, she turned down a narrow countryside road lined with old acacia trees and broken street lamps. Mud splashed against the sides of her small vehicle as she drove deeper into the darkness, away from everything he controlled. Away from everyone looking for him. In the back seat, the Billionaire Mafia boss drifted in and out of consciousness. Every bump in the road sent pain shooting through his ribs. Blood had dried along his collar, stiff against his once perfect suit. "Stay awake," she said firmly, glancing at him through the rearview mirror. "If you sleep now, you might not wake up." His eyelids fluttered. "Where are you taking me?" "Somewhere safe," she replied. "That's all you need to know." After nearly 20 minutes, she pulled up beside a small, isolated house at the edge of a quiet farming village. It was modest, faded paint, tin roof, a single porch light glowing weakly against the night. Crickets chirped in the surrounding fields, and distant dogs barked at unfamiliar movement. This place was invisible. Perfect. She struggled but managed to pull him inside, half carrying his weight over her shoulder. The scent of antiseptic and herbs lingered faintly in the air. Inside, the house was simple but organized, a wooden table, shelves lined with medical supplies, neatly folded linens. This wasn't just a house, it was a hidden clinic. She laid him carefully on a narrow bed beneath a hanging lamp. With steady hands, she cut through his blood-soaked shirt. Bruises had already darkened across his chest. A deep gash marked his shoulder. "You're lucky," she murmured quietly. "Very lucky." He forced his eyes open, studying her face under the light. She was calm. Focused. No fear. "You know who I am?" he asked weakly. Her hands paused for just a second. "Yes." "Then why help me?" She cleaned the wound without answering, her silence louder than words. Pain seared as she stitched the cut. He clenched his jaw but didn't cry out. Pride still lingered, even in weakness. After bandaging his ribs and wrapping his shoulder, she stepped back, watching him carefully. "For now," she said softly, "you don't exist." Outside, wind moved through the fields like a quiet warning. He had built an empire on power and control. But here, in this small hidden house far from the city, he was nothing more than a wounded man depending on a stranger whose name he didn't even know. And somewhere beyond those quiet fields, his enemies were already celebrating his death. By morning, the city had already moved on. News of a tragic highway explosion flashed briefly across television screens in cafes and corporate offices, a luxury car, unrecognizable, consumed by flames. Authorities reported no confirmed survivors. The story was vague. Quietly buried. But inside the top floor of the empire's headquarters, the atmosphere was anything but quiet. The massive office that once belonged to the Billionaire Mafia boss felt different now. The air was lighter. Looser. Dangerous. His brother stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, the same spot where the boss once watched the city like a ruler surveying his kingdom. But the brother didn't carry the same stillness. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his tie. "It's confirmed," he asked without turning around. A senior associate nodded. The car was completely destroyed. No one could survive that. Across the room, the sister sat in the leather chair behind the mahogany desk, his chair. She ran her fingers slowly over the polished surface, claiming it without saying the words. "Then we move immediately," she said calmly. "Transfer control of the northern docks to our division. Freeze his private accounts. Anyone loyal to him gets reassigned, or removed." The associates exchanged uncertain glances. Removed. The word echoed differently when she said it. Outside, traffic roared below. The city skyline glittered beneath the midday sun, unaware that its most feared ruler had supposedly fallen. Later that evening, the siblings hosted a private gathering in the penthouse lounge. Champagne flowed, jazz music played softly, and powerful figures from the underworld came offering cautious congratulations. "To new leadership," one investor said, raising his glass. The brother forced a confident smile. "To evolution." But beneath the celebration, cracks were already forming. Two lieutenants whispered in the corner. "Are we sure he's dead?" one muttered. "No body," the other replied quietly. "Just ashes." The sister noticed the hesitation in the room. Fear wasn't gone. It had simply changed shape. As the night deepened, thunderclouds gathered over the city once again, casting long shadows across the glass towers. The brother stepped onto the balcony for air, staring down at the streets far below. For the first time, he stood at the top. But instead of power, he felt something else. Uncertainty. Because empires built on fear don't collapse easily. And somewhere far from the city lights, a wounded king was still breathing. Unaware that his throne was already being fought over, and that reclaiming it would require more than survival. Morning arrived quietly over the small countryside house. Golden sunlight slipped through thin cotton curtains, carrying with it the distant sounds of village life, a rooster crowing somewhere beyond the fields, the hum of a motorbike passing on a dirt road, women speaking softly as they walked toward the market with woven baskets. Inside the hidden clinic, the Billionaire Mafia boss opened his eyes slowly. Pain greeted him first. A dull, constant ache in his ribs. A sharp pull in his stitched shoulder. The scent of antiseptic mixed with brewed tea filled the air. He tried to sit up. "Don't," her voice came firmly from across the room. The mysterious woman stepped closer, setting a tray of herbal medicine and clean bandages on a wooden table. In daylight, he could see her more clearly, calm eyes, steady hands, strength hidden beneath quiet composure. "You need at least a week before you can even think about standing properly," she said. "A week?" he muttered. "You have any idea what happens in a week in my world?" She met his gaze evenly. "In your world, perhaps chaos. In this one, healing." Silence settled between them. He studied the simple room, cracked plaster walls, shelves lined with medicine bottles, a faded rug covering worn wooden floors. This place was nothing like his skyscraper offices or guarded estates. It was humble. Honest. "You knew who I was," he said finally. "You still brought me here. Why?" She began changing his bandages carefully, her fingers brushing against bruised skin. He flinched but didn't pull away because leaving you there would have made me no better than the people who did that to you. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. Their eyes locked for a moment, tension not of fear, but something unfamiliar. Trust. Dangerous. Fragile. Outside, wind moved through tall grass like whispers across the land. You should have let me die, he said quietly, almost to himself. Her hands paused. No, she replied softly. You don't get to choose that so easily. For the first time since the accident, something shifted inside him. Not dominance. Not anger. Vulnerability. As the days passed, she helped him take careful steps across the small porch at sunset. He watched village children chase each other barefoot along the dusty road. He listened to laughter carried on warm evening air. A world untouched by his empire. One night, as stars filled the sky, he looked at her and asked again, more gently this time. What are you hiding? She didn't answer. But in her silence, was a secret powerful enough to shatter everything he thought he understood. And soon, that truth would surface. The night air felt heavier than usual. A storm was building again over the quiet countryside, wind sweeping through the tall grass surrounding the small house. Inside, the only light came from a single lamp beside the narrow bed where the Billionaire Mafia boss now sat upright, stronger than before, strong enough to leave. He had found his phone that evening. Not by accident. It was hidden beneath folded blankets inside a wooden chest. Turned off. SIM removed. He held it in his hand as she entered the room. You were planning to keep me here, he said calmly, too calmly. She stopped walking. I was planning to keep you alive. That's not the same thing. Thunder rolled across the dark sky. Shadows flickered along the walls. He stood slowly despite the pain in his ribs. You knew exactly who I was from the beginning. You hid my phone. You avoided every question about your past. So I'll ask you one last time. His eyes locked onto hers. Who are you? For a moment, she said nothing. Then she stepped closer, her voice steady but carrying years of buried emotion. My name is Amara. The name meant nothing to him. But the next words did. My father worked at the Northern Docks 10 years ago. He refused to sign one of your shipment approvals. The room felt smaller. He disappeared 3 days later. Memory struck him like another collision, a dock supervisor who had become inconvenient. A file closed without hesitation. You're lying, he said sharply. Her eyes shimmered, not with weakness, with fury held under control. I was 16 when I identified his body. Silence exploded louder than any argument. You ordered it, she continued. Maybe not personally. Maybe it was just business to you. But to me, it was everything. His breathing grew heavier. Not from injury. From realization. I trained, she said. Studied medicine. Waited. When I heard about your accident, I thought fate had delivered justice to my hands. Then why save me, he demanded. She looked at him, truly looked at him. Because when I saw you bleeding on that road, you didn't look like a monster. You looked human. The words cut deeper than accusation. Thunder cracked overhead as rain began striking the roof. You infiltrated my life for revenge, he said quietly. Yes. And now? She swallowed hard. Now I don't know. The man who had ruled an empire stood there, stripped of certainty. Betrayed by blood. Saved by the daughter of a ghost from his past. And for the first time, revenge wasn't the only thing at stake. Because what stood between them now wasn't just truth. It was a choice. And that choice would decide whether this story ended in destruction, or redemption. The city didn't know he was alive. That was his greatest advantage. Night had fallen by the time a black SUV rolled silently through the iron gates of the family estate. The guards at the entrance froze when they saw him step out of the vehicle, pale, scar visible near his temple, eyes colder than ever. Inside the mansion, music and laughter drifted faintly from the dining hall. His brother and sister were hosting another strategy dinner, pretending the throne was secure. The doors opened. Silence slammed into the room. A glass slipped from his brother's hand and shattered against marble flooring. "You," his brother whispered, stumbling backward. "That's impossible." His sister stood slowly, though her composure cracked for the first time. "We saw the car burn." "Yes," the boss replied evenly. "You did." The mysterious woman stood a few steps behind him, quiet but steady. She wasn't hiding anymore. The boss walked toward the head of the table, his seat, and placed a folder down. Photographs. Brake line reports. Security footage of unauthorized access to his vehicle. Bank transfers linking his siblings to a hired mechanic. "You were sloppy," he said. Rage flickered across his brother's face. "You left us no choice. You controlled everything. We were shadows in our own empire." "You chose greed," the boss answered coldly. Guards shifted nervously near the walls, unsure whose orders to follow. The sister stepped forward. "So what now?" she asked sharply. "You kill us? Publicly expose us? Start a war that tears this empire apart?" Her question hung in the air. For years, revenge would have been instant. Ruthless. Final. He looked at them, blood of his blood. Betrayers. Family. Then he looked at the woman beside him, the daughter of a man he had once destroyed. The storm outside thundered violently, rain striking the tall windows. "This empire," he said slowly, "has been built on fear. On silence. On graves." His voice lowered. "And it ends tonight." Shock spread across the room. "You're stepping down?" his brother asked, stunned. "I'm dismantling what should never have existed." Gasps echoed softly. "You don't get to erase what we've done," his sister hissed. "No," he replied. "But I can choose what happens next." He turned to the guards. "No blood tonight." For the first time in his life, he walked away from power. Not because he lost it. Because he chose to. And as the mansion doors closed behind him, the future was uncertain, but it was finally his to define. Dawn arrived quietly over the city, as if the world itself was unsure whether it deserved another chance. From the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, the skyline stretched endlessly, glass towers reflecting the first blush of sunlight, the river below shimmering like molten gold. The empire he had built stood beneath him, powerful, untouchable, feared. And yet, for the first time in years, he did not feel powerful. He stood without his suit jacket, white shirt sleeves rolled up, the faint scar near his collarbone catching the light, a reminder of betrayal, of blood, of survival. The city that once bowed to his name now felt strangely distant. Behind him, she stepped onto the balcony. The mysterious woman. No longer a shadow in his life. No longer a secret savior in the darkness. The soft morning breeze lifted her hair as she wrapped a shawl around her shoulders. The city's early sounds, vendors opening stalls, distant calls to prayer echoing between buildings, taxis honking awake, rose gently from below. "It's over," she said quietly. He let out a slow breath. "Is it?" On the glass table beside him lay two things, a signed document reclaiming full control of his empire, and a resignation letter that would dissolve his leadership entirely. Power. Or peace. His jaw tightened. "If I stay," he murmured, "I control it. I clean it. I make sure no one else gets hurt." "And if you walk away?" she asked softly. "Then I finally stop being the man they created." Silence settled between them, not heavy, but honest. She stepped closer. "You were betrayed," she said. "But you don't have to let betrayal define your future." Down below, the city pulsed with life, markets awakening, sunlight glinting off mosque domes and corporate logos alike. This was more than an empire. It was responsibility. It was consequence. He picked up the resignation letter. For a moment, his hand trembled. Then, with steady resolve, he tore it in half. "I'll stay," he said. "But not as the man I was." Her eyes softened, not with surprise, but with pride. "And me?" she asked, almost teasing. He looked at her fully now, vulnerability replacing steel. "You saved my life," he said. "If you're willing, stay. Not as a mystery. As my equal." A faint smile curved her lips. "Then let's rebuild it. Together." The sun rose higher, flooding the balcony in golden light. The empire remained. But its ruler had changed. And somewhere deep within the city's restless heart, a new story was beginning.